Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to another edition of Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. How is everybody doing out there today? Today, we're going evil. We're going to dive into some horror classics, I guess you could say. I've had some fun over the past few episodes going over film franchises, and I was debating for this episode whether to just do one film, to talk about one film out of this franchise, but no, I decided to do them all. Being as dope, um, like I said, initially I was gonna just do the one, so I went back to rewatch the first one in this franchise, and then I got stuck in this rabbit hole, and I end up watching all of them. So since I did that, I decided, let's go ahead on. Let's do the complete franchise, the complete film series of The Evil Dead. And this is, of course, in commemoration of the new release that's coming out this Friday, at least today, at the time of this episode's release, of Evil Dead Rise, the new addition to this franchise. And I'm excited for this film. I am super excited for it. It looks creepy as I don't know what. I love that. I love horror films that can take you on a journey, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and in some cases even physically. So I love horror films that do that, and as of late, and this is my thing before we get into our films today, of course, is the 1981 classic, the original, The Evil Dead, and Evil Dead 2 from 1987, Army of Darkness from 1992, and the reimagining Evil Dead from 2013. And I wanted, let's go back to the original films. I'll say the first two. I loved that era of horror, late 70s, early 80s, or actually throughout the 80s. That's my period where I just loved horror films. Now, you can contribute that to that's the era I grew up in. So it may be a little biased. I don't know. But it's just something about 80s horror films that has a different feel to it. It had its own distinct look, had its own distinct storytelling style, and it goes throughout all of horror films in that era, no matter who was the director, who was the star. It was just a cohesive tone throughout the horror genre around that time. Now, granted, you can make that argument in any era because early 2000 horror films have the same tone. Uh, Horror films that come out now basically hover around the same tone. So you can make that argument with that too. So that's not a real fair assessment, but it's just a different feel watching 80s horrors. Just think about it. Think about all of the franchises that spawn off from the 80s. And I'm talking horror, just horror. Nightmare on Elm Street spawned a plethora of films. Friday the 13th film franchise, a Halloween film franchise, Hellraiser, all these horror films that came out in the 80s are still going strong today with sequels and reboots and whatnot. And it brings us to the Evil Dead franchise, which started in 81 and is still going on to this day because we have a new one coming out today, in 2023. And so it just goes to show you that it's just something special about 1980s horror films. There was nothing, I would say, special. None of these franchises, I would say, reinvented the wheel per se, but it was just simple. It was a simpler time, and the movies were simpler. There wasn't so much complex plot to these horror films. They were what they were. They laid it all out. pretty much the first 5 to 10 minutes into the film, and we was off to the races. Movies maybe were 90 minutes, but that was it. As of today, the movies that come out today, especially these horror films, everything is psychological. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of those movies are good. Some of these horror movies that's coming out in the last 20 years have been good, but it's way too much thinking involved for me. I want a horror film. I just want to go to be scared. I'm not there to try to solve the mystery. Even though sometimes, like I said, sometimes that is all fine and good. For instance, like the Scream franchise, it's a murder mystery in sorts. You trying to find out who the killer is and whatnot. It's fun for what it is, but sometimes you just need that horror film that is just there to scare the urine out of you. And these are the type of films that I gravitate to. I don't know if Evil Dead Rise is going to be that. I plan to go see it in the next day or so, and I can't wait. But we shall see. But we have 4 films to review today. And as I said when I started off the show, I was just gonna do one. And it was gonna be The Evil Dead from 1981. But I just I, I went back into a nostalgia kick when I went back to go watch it again, so I can have fresh eyes in this review, because I haven't seen it in years, the original, and it's a lot that I forgot about it. So I said, okay, I can't give an honest review without watching it again. So I watched it, and when I sat down and watched it, so many memories popped up. With the first time I ever watched it, and I just enjoyed it. And then I told myself, hey, I watched the first one, let me watch the second one again just to get back into it. I watched the second one, finished the second one, and said, you know what? I can't remember anything about Army of Darkness. Let me watch that one again. So I watched that and decided, you know what? We might as well cap it all off. Let me watch the 2013 version. And so my whole Saturday was watching these 4 films a couple of weeks ago. And so I am Evil Dead out at this point. And I said, you know what? We're just going to do the whole show on all 4 of the Evil Dead films, or all the previous 4. Evil Dead Rise notwithstanding. So let's start off. Since we have 4 films, there's no reason to tally around. Let's jump right in. Our first review is the first one in this franchise, and it is the 1981 cult classic, The Evil Dead. This is written and directed by Sam Raimi, who is just known as this icon when it comes to the Evil Dead, when it comes to horror, hey, even superhero movies. He went on to direct Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2, and Spider-Man 3 with Tobey Maguire. He directed the most recent Doctor Strange sequel, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And Sam Raimi has a distinct style to his filmmaking. You either like it or you don't. The Dutch angles, the crazy zoom in, steady cam work that he does. It's a lot of craziness that goes into his filmmaking. But I think a lot of that is because of this particular film. The Evil Dead, it wasn't commissioned by any studio. It wasn't sold to any studio. This is a pure independent film. To give you a little backstory, Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell, who stars in these films as Ash, they grew up together. They were friends since they were kids, and they both made several low budget, like Super 8mm films together when they were younger. They wanted to be filmmakers. And so and several of them were comedies. One of them is called Clockwork, and the other one is called It's Murder. Shooting a suspense scene in its murder inspired them to approach careers in the horror genre. After researching horror cinema at drive-through theaters, Sam Raimi was set to direct a horror film, opting to shoot a proof of concept short film described by Sam Raimi as a prototype that would attract the interest of financiers and use the fund raised to shoot a full length feature film. The short film that Remy created was called Into the Woods, which was produced for $1,600. For The Evil Dead, Sam Raimi was required to have $100,000 to shoot that film. To generate funds to produce The Evil Dead, Sam Raimi approached Phil Grawls, a lawyer of one of his friends. Sam Raimi showed him Within the Woods, and although Grawls was not impressed by the short film, he offered Sam Raimi legal advice on how to produce the Evil Dead. With his advice in mind, Sam Raimi asked a variety of people for donations and even eventually begged some. I mean, look, this was if this for all of you who have a passion, and I'm assuming that's everybody. When you have a passion, you would go to great lengths to get that accomplished. And he was just all in on making this film. And people might look down on begging, but look at his career now. I'll just say that. Look at him now. People probably go to him begging at this point. Bruce Campbell, on the other hand, he had asked several of his own family members, and Remy had asked every individual he thought would be interested. He eventually raised enough money to produce a full-length feature film, though not the full amount he originally wanted. He didn't get every penny that he needed to make The Evil Dead. Sam Raimi has said that the film cost $375,000. With enough money to produce the film, Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell set out to make what was then entitled Book of the Dead, a name inspired by Sam Raimi's interest in the fiction of H.P. Lovecraft. The film was supposed to be a remake of It Within the Woods, with higher production values and a full-length runtime. Sam Raimi turned 20 just before shooting began, and he considered the project his rite of passage. The Evil Dead from 1981 is a supernatural horror film written and directed by Sam Raimi, as I said before, and this is his feature film directorial debut. The film stars Bruce Campbell, and in case you don't know, the plot for The Evil Dead goes as such. The story focuses on 5 college students vacationing in an isolated cabin in a remote wooded area after they find an audio tape that, while played, released a legion of demons and spirits. 4 members of the group suffer from demonic possession, forcing the 5th member, Ash Williams, who is played by Bruce Campbell, to survive an onslaught of increasingly gory mayhem. And it is just that. This film is, to say that it is straight off the bat, this is a low budget film. It is low budget to the nth degree. You could tell that every quarter was scraped up off the ground. They were struggling to make this movie, and it's beautiful in that sense. As somebody who, and that somebody being me, somebody who wants to make films, who always dreamed of making films, this is a film that you would sit back and study, that you will look and see how corners were cut. You can see how you utilize what you have. You have to utilize your environment to the best of its ability. You know what I'm saying? You can't do pickup shots here or get coverage shots, whereas you get close-ups of both the actors from over the shoulder views and stuff like that. No, you have to get one shot takes. And you could tell that a lot of one shot takes took place. They didn't have time or the money to reset and do pickup shots or reshoots at the end. But that's fine because it works, because this movie is so chaotic and so wild and crazy. It fits, and the tone fits. You're never questioning what film am I watching. Is this I thought this was an Evil Dead movie. You knew from jump that the movie comes on. These five friends, they're in the car and they're traveling to this isolated cabin, and the music is eerie. There's nothing cheery about it. You know that these kids aren't going. They're not gonna. This is not gonna turn out well for them. This is not good. These. It's not gonna be your typical weekend with teenagers in an isolated cabin. Just a sex orgy. No, no, no. Immediately that they're in trouble. They almost get in an accident on the way to the cabin. It just, every second was tense. You're never comfortable as far as the actors, the characters in this story. There's never a moment of being comfortable. They were always on edge at every second, every step throughout this film. Bruce Campbell, this is coming from the eyes of somebody who watched this when, to be fair, and I wanted to say this at the beginning of the show, I watched part 2 before I watched part 1. It's crazy because I didn't even know of the Evil Dead until Evil Dead 2 came out, and I watched Evil Dead 2 unknowingly that, oh, this is a sequel, because around that time I was about 7, 8, I don't know, when I watched it. And I'm like, wait, there was a sequel there was a film before this. This is the sequel. And so I had to go back, and it was years later that I actually watched this film. And it was kind of weird to watch it out of order. It was strange to watch it out of order. But I'll get to that when I get to the sequel. But when I did watch this, I knew who Bruce Campbell was at this time. I knew who Sam Raimi was around that time. And I was like, boy, this is a real cheaply made movie. This is a real cheap movie, but it fits. And I loved how no punches were pulled here. The young ladies, who are older ladies now, but at the time of the film, these young ladies, they put them through the ringer, man. You get the scene when the one actress who is I guess about to be sexually assaulted by a tree. I'm laughing because it's ridiculous, but it fits the movie. Sadly, it's just wild. It's a wild movie, and she's not tied down, but held down by these branches on the ground. They're whipped through glass windows. What these actors went through in this, it was torture, man. And poor Bruce Campbell, he went through it the most. I don't know. I know that Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi are besties, but boy, they went through the ringer. Sam Raimi put him through the ringer, bruh. Very physical. And when you put it in the perspective that this was a low budget, ultra low budget film, you can pretty much assume that there were no stuntmen. They didn't have money for stunt performers. So these actors had to do all this stuff themselves. And man, Bruce Campbell, bro. Bruce Campbell went through it. All the actors and actresses in this film, there's 5 total, and they all went through it. And the gore. This is a very gory movie. But not as gory as you would think. I say very gory, but it's not bloody gory, if that makes sense. It's just like sickening stuff. You see this black ooze come out of people's mouths and stuff like that. It's just real gory. It's blood now. there is blood. You see someone get stabbed in the ankle with a pencil and just yanked around in his and her ankle, and it like ugh, you know. You see, I mean, you see some disgusting stuff, but it fits, man. When you think of demonic spirits and stuff like that, I would say, yeah, demons would do that to your body. Uh, but it is very, very uncomfortable for those who are not necessarily into horror or into body horror or into gore. Uh, this probably wouldn't be for you. But if you're into that type of stuff, if this is your if this is your bag, um, this is a real good film. And I harken back to what I was saying before. I give this a high grade for the simple fact, for those who are inspiring filmmakers, this is a film that you should watch. This is a film that you should watch and study and see how this movie was made. You can really get the nuts and bolts of making a low budget film of this quality, and it should give you all the hope in the world. This movie has no reason for being as successful as it was. This movie was produced for $375,000. It went on to make $2.7 million domestically, and it made $29.4 million worldwide, making it one of the most successful independent films of all time. It's an inspiring tale, and it spawned many sequels. So I really did enjoy it. Rewatching it again, of course, it's campy. Of course, it's dated in a lot of ways. I mean, this was 1981. We're talking about a film that's over 40 years old, so it's going to be a little dated, but it is enjoyable to watch for all of you horror fans. It earns its cult classic status, and I give The Evil Dead from 1981 a letter grade of a B plus. And moving on to the next film in the Evil Dead franchise, it is none other than Evil Dead 2 from 1987, which is also referred to as Evil Dead 2 Dead by Dawn. Like I said before, this was the first one I saw in the franchise. I was about 8 years old when I saw the Evil Dead 2, and had no knowledge of the first one. I was completely oblivious to the original film, because I wasn't super into horror around that time. I was starting to get into it around that time. It was, Lost Boys and films like that. By little softball horror films, and I never really got into hardcore horror films. One, because it was frowned upon in my house. It wasn't champion to watch hardcore horror movies, but good old Kevin Reeve, I found the way. And so I've watched this movie, and just to go back to the original, you can imagine how confused I was when I when I watched the original, and after watching the sequel, even though it wouldn't have been any better whether I watched it first or second, or vice versa, because I was so confused at the time. Because it wasn't too long after I watched part two that I went back and watched the original. It came on TV or whatever. So I was like, man, this doesn't make sense. And at the time, it didn't. It really didn't make sense. Not the movie per se, but how is this a sequel? It wasn't a sequel. It's called Evil Dead 2, but this is really not a sequel. This is more of a remake of the first film. It basically is. Yeah, you had the same character, Ash Williams, who is played by the same actor, Bruce Campbell, same director, whatever. This go around, this is more of a comedy horror film. It was a lot more comedy in this one. Not overshadowing comedy, yet it had comedic elements as per the original one, which was a hardcore horror film. But this one is more to Sam Raimi's sensibilities, I believe, more to his style, or he found his niche, because that was his first film. And so now he's kind of getting in the groove of his directing. He know what type of films he wants to make. And so, like I said, this confused me. Like, this is a sequel, because the first time I watched it, or maybe second time or whatever, I'm like, okay, that's when I realized it was a sequel. I'm like, well, why would Ash go back to that cabin? Because it wasn't explained. It's a different story per se, but same in the sense of he goes to the cabin, finds the Book of the Dead, finds the recording. It's basically the same recording. Um, the recording says the incantations, and uh, the demons come and takes his girlfriend and blah blah blah. Uh, Basically the same blueprint as the first one, but done with a more lucrative budget. This film was made for $3.5 million, and so he had room to wiggle here, and he wiggled it. Oh my God, did he wiggle it? This yet and still, with all that being said, this is my favorite one out the whole franchise. I'm just gonna come out and tell you. I don't know if it's because it's the first one I watched and I fell in love with it. Um, it's just something about this one that it's better. I think having the comedy element involved with this version was key. You had to do something different. If this was like a remake, it, they call it a remake slash sequel in a sense, because there's a lot, that it's the same, yet there are some different elements in this film. But in any event, it was smart to add the comedic element to it. I feel, because it gives it more life, and it lets Bruce Campbell be Bruce Campbell in in all of his glory, for what we known to love Bruce Campbell for, his comedic timing, his that chiseled jaw, having that facial expression. It just played it. This was like a one man stage play, if you will. If they make actually they did end up making a musical of the Evil Dead. I don't know if it made it to Broadway or not, but there's actually a musical for the Evil Dead. But this feels like a Broadway one man show, maybe off Broadway, but regardless. And he just dove right in and he chewed up the scene. It was beautiful, beautiful to watch. This movie wasted no time. The first film, we had to wait about 20 minutes before things ramped up. This movie, and this time I watched it, I clocked it. 5 minutes in, the demons were there. we were off and running as soon as the credits stopped rolling, and it didn't let up at no point throughout this film. I enjoyed this so much. Is it campy? Yes, it is campy. Is it a little dated from 1987? Yeah, you're gonna get that. You're gonna get that. But man, the fun you have with this. I actually watched this twice the other day. As per the other ones in this franchise, I only watched one time. I went back and watched The Evil Dead 2 again because I love The Evil Dead 2. It's just something about it. It just flows perfectly. And this is where my love for this franchise was born, and why I get excited for another edition, no matter what it is coming out from The Evil Dead, or whatever project from Sam Raimi I'm diving into, whatever project from Bruce Campbell I'm diving into. It spawned from this film. As I said, they had a bigger budget this to go around. Special effects was better. The makeup effects were better. Even the story, even though it was just Bruce Campbell, you still had other elements You had the archaeologist, just like in the first one, who the husband and wife who went to the cabin to do this, to research the book. But we add the element of the daughter who was coming with the lost pages from the Book of the Dead to meet up with her parents, but her parents were dead now because of reading from the book and being possessed and whatnot. And them getting to the cabin, her and her companion with the tow truck driver and his partner. I don't know if that was his wife or not. I can't remember if they cleared that up, if that was his wife or not. Probably was just his girlfriend. But they all came in at a portion, and it's like, okay. And you regularly in normal films, that's when the movie amps up, when more characters show up. But at this point, we're getting into the end of the second act, maybe the start of the third, when the new characters are being introduced, which is something that you don't see in film. Normally you get the introduction of all your characters in the beginning, in the first act, in the first few scenes of a film. We get these characters right in the middle of the movie. When all this chaos is going on at this cabin, you have the little subplot with them trying to get to the cabin. And once they get to the cabin, they regret it. And it was just nicely done, well constructed. This is it's no secret, I've said it anyway, my favorite of the franchise, probably one of my favorite horror films ever, to be honest with you. I still get the feels when I watch this movie, and I feel like that 8-year-old kid sitting in his room sneaking to watch this movie because I didn't want my mom to know that I was watching it. And I loved every minute of it. Evil Dead 2 from 1987 gets a letter grade of an A. Now, that was my favorite Evil Dead film. Now we're going to my least favorite Evil Dead film, and it is Army of Darkness, which was released in 1992. Now, this was set up at the end of Evil Dead 2 when Ash was sucked into that hole, into that portal or whatever, and he ended up in medieval times. And that was kind of the cliffhanger, left off. He has the chainsaw for a hand, and and he's standing around with all of the soldiers in their armor and whatnot, um, celebrating him, as the prophesized uh, one who's going to rid them of the Deadites. All right, cool. And it goes to black. He's screaming, and it goes to black. And you're like, okay, okay, that's interesting. I guess it was kind of a out of a left field type of deal, dealing with what we were dealing with the Evil Dead, but whatever. And I know I championed changing the franchise, doing things differently, and this film does everything different than you would consider Evil Dead film. You can really set this apart in many aspects. Now, yes, the Book of the Dead is present. There are Deadites. Yes, all that is there. But it is, I don't know. It just didn't. It wasn't what I was looking for. And when I rewatched it a few days ago, I still have that same feeling. Now, is it a horrible film? No, it's not a horrible film. It just doesn't quite fit. When you think of the Evil Dead, it just doesn't fit. This is a dark fantasy horror film. And once again, we have returning Sam Raimi to direct, co-write, and even co-edit this film. And also returning, we have Bruce Campbell as Ash Williams. And this time around, Ash Williams is trapped in the Middle Ages and battled the undead in his quest to return to present time. Um, it's a weird type of movie. This is something that you just have to go in and say, all right, I know what this is. I know this is a weird, crazy version of the Evil Dead. And it was smart, I guess, not calling it Evil Dead 3, you know, because it doesn't feel like Evil Dead is more of his own standalone thing with Evil Dead elements. Uh I liked Bruce Campbell. Bruce Campbell is he was born to play this. This is his thing. This is his baby. And whatever gripes I may have about any of these films, none of them are directed towards Bruce Campbell. He is Ash Williams, and Ash Williams is Bruce Campbell, and so there's that. Now, this film suffers from lack of character development, whereas in the previous two films, you only have five characters throughout the films. You had five characters in the first film. You had five characters in part two. This go around, you have a plethora of people, and you don't get to know any of them. At least in the other two films, you got to know those characters. You know, you understood their motivations and what they were getting into and whatnot. This go around, you didn't get that, and I think it suffered because the only character I could connect to was Ash, and I guess that's the only one you needed to by right, being as though he's the protagonist. But you know, there's no motivations from any other character. The I guess you could say the kingdom that he falls into. None of the people in the kingdom or anybody that I would cheer for, you know, nobody that I would uh, uh get behind. There's no development. They're just there. You know, they're basically set pieces. You know, even the young, I don't know what she is, little princess or whatever that he has a relationship with, it just happens. You know, it's just like a there it is. It didn't work. It did not work at all for me. The Lord, I think it was Lord Arthur. I don't know if he was supposed to be the author of you know, King Arthur and the Merryman, whatever they are. I don't know if that was the same one that, of course, it was never flushed out. But it would have been nice to have a nice little interaction there, you know, to see why Lord Arthur did not like Ash. You know, it's obvious that this guy was prophesized. You know, he is not of this time, and they knew that. You know, everybody knew that, but it was still this hatred, and it lasts the whole movie. His facial expression never changed. It was it's it was just bland. Everything about that was bland when it came to them. As I said, Bruce Campbell, he saved the movie from being, you know, blah, because not only is he Ash, but he's also evil Ash when they do the little split when he's possessed uh in a cool little scene. Now, I love this scene when he was in this little windmill cabin or whatever, and the Deadites are messing with him, and he breaks this mirror, and all of his reflections come out of those little broken pieces, and little miniature Bruce Campbells are running running around, and they all possess him, or one of them possesses him, and splits off and becomes this evil Ash, and that was nice. I love that part of it, but besides that, eh, nothing else really worked for me. Even the battle with the Army of Darkness, they didn't need Ash. They honestly didn't even need Ash for that, you know, and it was just a waste. It was honestly a waste. It was nice um that when he got the book, he had to do this incantation to get the book, and he didn't do it. He didn't do it right, and that's what rose the dead. So it was all his fault that they rose up, and I like that aspect of it because it lets you know that Ash, this isn't his bag, man. He's not a hero. He's not you know, this highly skilled uh 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 paranormalist. You know what I'm saying? He's just a guy, you know, who wants to go back home. That's all he wants. He just got thrown into this situation because he happened to go to this cabin that happened to have the Book of the Dead and happened to rise the demons. You know, this wasn't. something that he was seeking out nor wanted to be a part of at all. And especially this situation where he's thrown back in time and has to be the quote unquote savior of this era of time of these people who are dealing with the same things he was dealing with. And so I love that part about it. Now, but with all that being said, at the end of the day, it feels like a film that they just threw together, that they just made just to say they can make it and to justify the cliffhanger from Evil Dead 2. And that's the way I feel, you know? It just did not feel like a well constructed film like the Evil Dead 2, like the Evil Dead, even, you know? It just felt like something that they just did to do, you know? And, you know, God bless them for it. It was what it was. Like I said, it wasn't horrible, but it definitely was not one of the best. Army of Darkness, the third in the Evil Dead film franchise, released in 1992, gets a letter grade of a C minus. Wish I wanted to like it. That's why I watched it again. A few days ago, I watched it again to maybe get fresh eyes because I hadn't seen it probably since the 90s. The last time I saw Army of Darkness, so watching it again, I had the exact same takeaways that I did in 1992. And so it's nothing changed. It's still a watchable movie, but nothing that I was seeking. This would be the last film that I would ever seek out in the Evil Dead franchise. All right, moving on to our last review of the day of the Evil Dead franchise thus far, not counting the recently released Evil Dead Rise. We have a rehashing or a reimagining or a reboot of sorts of this famous franchise, Evil Dead from 2013, directed by Freddie Alvarez, who making his directorial debut in this film. This is the first of the franchise that does not involve Sam Raimi. As far as in the director's chair, he did produce this film along with Bruce Campbell, and Bruce Campbell is not starring in this film either. And so they took a back seat on this version. This, like I said, is a reimagining, a different kind of take on the franchise, even though it kept the same sensibilities as the original. This go around, the film stars Jane Levy, Lou Taylor Putsky, Jessica Lewis, Elizabeth Blackmore, and Shiloh Fernandez. And this go around, the story follows a group of 5 people under attack by a supernatural entity at a remote cabin in the woods. Pretty much the same log line, same log line as the original. But this is a different group and they're there for a different reason. This go around, uh the young actress Jane Levy, she plays a character who is a heroin addict or a drug addict. I'm saying heroin, but I don't know what particular drug it was, but it wasn't a good one. So she was an addict, and they all had an intervention. This is her friends. Shiloh plays her brother, and they all come together to uh have kind of an intervention and her to go through this little detox in the woods in this at this cabin where she's secluded from everything. She can't get to any drugs or anything like that. Very kind of smart but kind of reckless at the same time. Now one of the friends is a nurse in case something goes wrong, health wise, so that was kind of smart. But anything could have happened, and wouldn't we know it did this go around. I like that part of it. It's a new twist to the story, yet uh uh keeping the same sensibilities. I really like that. um the actress Jane Levy, who plays Mia, really good. Movie still in, or should I say, star making performance. I've seen her pop up in other things, but I thought she would be bigger from this. She did an excellent job as the lead character in this film. I thought that Shadow Fernandez did a great job as her brother David. Uh, there were some really, really creepy stuff in this film. This was a true horror film. This movie was marketed as the most terrifying film you will ever experience. And I remember seeing that on a poster. I remember seeing that in the trailer leading up to this film's release. And, the trailer made it seem like it was, I mean, the way they cut the trailer, it was like, oh my God, this is disturbing, man. It's something like, it's more disturbing than the Evil Dead Rise trailer. And that trailer got me like, ooh. But this one had, it was just creepy and scary. And I'm like, man, I gotta see this. This is a true horror fan's wet dream, if you will. And so I will say it wasn't the most terrifying film I ever saw, but it was close. It was very, very close. For the uninitiated, you will be creeped out beyond creeped out in this film. This had some of the most just blood curdling, no pun intended, visuals that you would ever see. The scene with I believe the actress is Jessica Lewis. I forgot her character's name, but she when she's possessed, and as soon as she gets possessed, she urinates down her leg, and they show it. It's like, man, this is real. This is some intense stuff, man. She just standing still and she can't move, and then she takes the mirror, she smashes her head against the mirror, and she cuts her mouth open with the glass, and I'm like, oh my God, what is happening? And she stabs one of the dudes with a syringe, stabbing him in the eyeball and all this other stuff. I'm like, oh my God, this is brutal. Uh he beats her to death with a piece of a commode, the top of the commode just beats her because he's freaking out, because she's trying to kill him. But they don't understand what's going on when they find the book. I couldn't stand his character. Now, if anything out of this, and I think that's Lou Taylor Pewski. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Eric is the character's name. Eric. I couldn't stand his character. It's the one bad thing throughout this movie. Uh, he's just an idiot. Everybody's telling him don't read from the book, and in typical idiotic movie fashion, he reads from the book, and so he unleashes these demons, and but he gets it, bruh. He gets it throughout. I mean, aside from that attack, he gets his arm broken. Uh, he gets shot. I mean, he goes through the ringer. As the one who unleashed this evil upon them in this cabin. And the young lady, the girlfriend of David, Natalie, who gets her arm possessed. And it was a nice little throwback Easter egg to the originals when Ash in the Evil Dead 2 had to cut off his hand with a chainsaw because it was possessed. And so in this film, the young lady, Natalie, her arm, after she's bitten by Mia, is starting to get possessed. So she cuts off her arm with one of those electric knives, kitchen knives. Oh, it was brutal. It was brutal, and she still ended up getting possessed. It was brutal, man. This was some of the most just like gut-wrenching horror you would see. I might have to take that back as the most terrifying. It really was terrifying. It was some terrifying stuff to witness. We get the throwback scene with the tree, um, sexually assaulting Mia, and I mean going full bore this time. As far as like the original, it, it was implicated, but you really didn't see anything go full on. In this version, in the 2013 version, yeah, it went there. So, the tree did it. The tree had intercourse with Mia. Yeah, it was brutal, man. It was brutal, and uh, it stayed true to the original. It had every part of the original that you loved was in this movie, yet still adding more to it. The little gripe that I had early on in the show about horror films, recent horror films that are more psychological, takes a while to ramp up and get to it. This film didn't do that. We got right to it, man. The opening scene where we see the young girl walking around the woods, and you thinking that she's trying to escape the cabin, and she gets caught, and she's brought back into this basement. You see people in there trying to, pray over this woman. She's tied up to this banister, and this old man is there with a shotgun, and you just hear the girl say, "Daddy, Daddy, untie me. Why are you doing this, Daddy?" And you're like, "Oh my God, what are they about to do? Is this a sacrifice?" You thinking like, "Oh my God, this poor girl," and all of a sudden it switches, and she's possessed. She was the possessed one, and the dad had to blow the girl's head off with a shotgun, and it was at that moment you knew, okay, we're in for a treat here. And the movie didn't let up at all throughout. This was a real good addition to the Evil Dead franchise. It is one of the best films in the franchise. I must say, man, it was very, very good. Everything that you would want out of it, out of a horror film, that holds the title of Evil Dead. This was it. Evil Dead from 2013 gets a letter grade of a A-. Awesome film in this franchise. I enjoyed it. This is another one I can go back and watch over and over again. Of these films, really do like it. I was hoping that we would get sequels, spawned off from this film, but we didn't. It took us 10 years to get this, and I don't know if this Evil Dead Rise is a direct sequel or connected to this particular film, but either way, it's fine. They don't have to be connected, to be honest with you. Uh, Basically, these films are about the Book of the Dead, and so as long as the Book of the Dead is involved, that's all you need to worry about. And so there you have it. That is the Evil Dead franchise in its totality. Uh, the Evil Dead from 1981, Evil Dead 2 from 1987, Army of Darkness from 1992, and of course, Evil Dead from 2013, all in anticipation for the fifth entry into this franchise, which is being released today in theaters, Evil Dead Rise. I am so excited for that film. Uh Man, horror lovers, bruh, is this one of your favorite franchises? I love the Evil Dead franchise. Even Army of Darkness, it has its place. It has its place. All of these films have something that I can look back on. I guess it's more nostalgic than anything, to be completely fair. Maybe you look at these films, if you're a true horror lover, like, man, these movies are horrible. But not for me. I love these movies. Apparently, there's something there that is touching people's sensibilities, because here we are 40 years later, 42 years, I think, since the original came out, and we're still going strong with this franchise. Not to mention that I didn't review today. They had a TV show, Ash versus the Evil Dead, that was on Stars a few years ago, which Bruce Campbell returned as Ash Williams in that franchise, in that series rather. Uh, and it was pretty good. Like, I watched the first season, and I never went back to watch the, I don't know how many seasons they had after that, but I never got back around to watching it before it was canceled or it finished, wrapped up or whatever. So, but I was liking what I saw, but I just never got back around to watch it. But it's still going strong, man. It's still going strong. They have video games. There are Evil Dead video games. I mentioned earlier there was a Evil Dead the musical. This is a true franchise, and uh I love it, man. I love it, and I can't wait for this new edition. But more importantly, how do you feel? How do you feel about the Evil Dead? Are you excited for the Evil Dead Rise? Is this your thing, man? Do you love horror films, and are you highly anticipating this new installment of this franchise? Let me know. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also look me up on Twitter at KB Radio Network and on other social media platforms. Just look up the KB Radio Network. Don't forget, everybody, 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you are currently listening to movie goodness here on the KB Radio Network. And don't forget that we are on YouTube. Swing over on YouTube at the KB Radio Network page. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. Everyone, thank you for joining me today. I really do appreciate it as we reviewed all of the Evil Dead films. Oh man, I'm so excited for this new one. I can't wait. Hope you are enjoying your day, your weekend, your week, your month, everything. Hope you are enjoying everything out of life. Thank you for joining me once again. Want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love one another. And until we speak again, you all be blessed.